Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout history, depictions of Jesus Christ have varied widely across cultures, artistic expressions, and theological interpretations. In the Western world, the image of a fair-skinned, light-haired, blue-eyed Savior has dominated religious iconography for centuries. This portrayal has been so deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness that any alternative representation often sparks controversy, debate, and, at times, outrage. Yet, historical evidence, biblical accounts, and anthropological studies point to a reality that challenges this familiar image. Jesus was likely a man of color, a Middle Eastern Jew born in a region where darker skin tones were the norm rather than the exception. The concept of a black Jesus is not merely an attempt to reclaim the historical accuracy of his appearance, but a profound challenge to entrench racial, cultural, and spiritual assumptions. For many, the idea evokes discomfort, not because of its implausibility, but because it appends centuries of Eurocentric theology and whitewash narratives. It questions how race, power, and religion have intersected to shape the spiritual beliefs of billions. This exploration is not about imposing a singular image of Jesus, but about uncovering truths buried beneath layers of artistic interpretation, colonial imposition, and theological manipulation. By examining the historical, scriptural, and cultural evidence, we aim to unveil a more authentic understanding of who Jesus was, what he represented, and why his true identity matters in a world still grappling with the legacies of racism and division. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a town in Judea, during the reign of King Herod. Judea, located in the eastern Mediterranean, was a crossroads of cultures, a melting pot where African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean peoples mingled. The population was diverse, but the majority were Semitic, with physical features reflecting the region's climate and genetic history: olive to dark skin, dark hair, and brown eyes. The Bible itself offers subtle hints about Jesus' appearance. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is described as having hair like wool and feet like burnished bronze. While this passage is metaphorical, its imagery has often been interpreted as indicative of darker skin and textured hair. Such descriptions starkly contrast with the pale-skinned Jesus of Renaissance art, which was heavily influenced by the aesthetics and racial ideals of European society. Moreover, Jesus' lineage further underscores his non-European heritage. As a descendant of King David and part of a Jewish community that had lived in the region for centuries, Jesus would have inherited the physical characteristics common among Middle Eastern Jews of his time. His life, spent traveling through Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, interacting with diverse groups, underscores his rootedness in a multicultural, multi-ethnic world. The image of a white Jesus began to emerge prominently during the Roman Empire's adoption of Christianity under Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. As Christianity spread across Europe, it adapted to the cultural norms and artistic styles of the regions it reached. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci depicted Jesus with European features, reflecting their own societies rather than historical reality. These images became iconic, not because they were accurate, but because they resonated with the dominant cultures of the time. Colonialism further cemented the Eurocentric Jesus. European powers used Christianity as a tool of conquest, presenting a white savior to justify their superiority in civilizing missions. Indigenous peoples across Africa, the Americas, and Asia were introduced to a version of Jesus that bore little resemblance to the historical figure, but aligned perfectly with the colonial agenda. This Jesus was not only a spiritual figure, but a symbol of European dominance and divine endorsement. The concept of a black Jesus is not new. Throughout history, marginalized communities have reimagined Jesus in their own image as an act of spiritual and cultural resistance. In the African American church, the idea of a black Jesus gained prominence during the civil rights movement. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X spoke of a Jesus who identified with the oppressed, challenging the whitewashed narratives that had justified slavery, segregation, and systemic racism. Artists, writers, and theologians have also contributed to this reimagining. In James Cone's seminal work, Black Theology and Black Power, he argues that Jesus' message is inherently revolutionary, aligning with the struggles of Black people against oppression. Cone's Black Jesus is not just a historical figure, but a symbol of liberation, embodying the hope and resilience of the oppressed. In Africa and the African diaspora, depictions of a Black Jesus have appeared in art, music, and literature, challenging the colonial legacy of Christianity. These representations are not just about reclaiming racial identity, but about affirming the universality of Jesus' message. They remind us that Jesus transcends cultural and racial boundaries, offering hope and salvation to all. The portrayal of Jesus is not a trivial matter of artistic preference. It has profound implications for faith, identity, and justice. A whitewashed Jesus perpetuates a Eurocentric worldview that marginalizes non-European cultures and histories. It reinforces the idea that whiteness is the default, the ideal, and the divine. Conversely, recognizing Jesus' likely appearance as a man of color challenges these assumptions, affirming the value and dignity of all people, regardless of race. For Black and other marginalized communities, a Black Jesus is a source of empowerment. It challenges the narrative that Christianity is a white man's religion, showing that the faith's origins are deeply rooted in the Middle East and Africa. It aligns with the biblical theme of God siding with the oppressed, offering a vision of Jesus who understands and shares in their struggles. Moreover, a more accurate portrayal of Jesus fosters greater inclusivity within the Christian community. It reminds believers that Jesus came for all people, transcending racial and cultural barriers. It encourages a more global understanding of Christianity, celebrating its rich diversity and rejecting the narrow, divisive interpretations that have often dominated. Despite the evidence, the idea of a Black Jesus remains controversial. Critics argue that focusing on Jesus' race distracts from his spiritual message. They claim that Jesus' teachings of love, compassion, and salvation are universal, rendering his physical appearance irrelevant. While this perspective has merit, it overlooks the fact that representations of Jesus have never been neutral. They reflect and shape societal values, influencing how people perceive themselves, others, and God. The debate also highlights the tension between historical accuracy and cultural representation. For many, the image of Jesus as a white man is deeply meaningful, a reflection of their own cultural identity and spiritual experience. Changing this image feels like a loss, a challenge to their faith. Yet, acknowledging the diversity of Jesus' representations can enrich, rather than diminish, our understanding of him. It invites us to see Jesus not as a figure confined to one culture or race, but as a Savior who belongs to all. The shocking truth about Black Jesus is not just about his physical appearance, but about what that truth reveals about us. It challenges us to confront the ways race, power, and culture have shaped our understanding of faith. It invites us to embrace a more inclusive, authentic vision of Jesus, one that affirms the dignity and worth of all people. In a world still divided by racism and inequality, the message of a Black Jesus is more relevant than ever. It is a call to justice, a reminder that God stands with the oppressed, and an invitation to see the divine in those who have been marginalized. By uncovering the truth about Jesus, we uncover deeper truths about ourselves, our history, and our faith. This journey is not just about reclaiming the past, but about shaping a future where all are valued, loved, and included in the story of salvation.